We're going to get started. It seems like it's 6 o'clock. I want to welcome you here this evening. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Mark Gauss, I'm the superintendent of schools. We'll do some introductions here in a moment. But I want to thank you for coming out on a busy time for an important topic and a series of conversations. And I apologize if I'm a bit winded. The beautiful thing about my job is not long ago I was 12 miles offshore in Frenchburg, so I was able to get back in time for this. So thank you. We have a couple of individuals who will join us. It's hard to plan events without having some conflict. One of our principals, Rhonda Fulton, is a concert tonight in Southwest, and Jandria True is finishing a board meetings, so she'll join us. Why don't we start with here, Tim? If you guys could introduce yourselves and your role in the district.
My name is Tim Blaine. I'm a school resource officer for Bar Harbor, Mount Desert, and the high school.
Ian Braun, assistant principal, dean of students, MDIHS.
Heather Webster, assistant principal at Connor Jefferson School in Bar Harbor.
I'm Matt Haney. I'm the high school principal.
I'm Mike Zabori. I'm the principal at the Trenton Elementary School.
I'm Gloria Del Sandro, the principal at the Mount Desert Elementary School.
Thanks. I think one of the things we wanted to, we have some board members here this evening too. Heather Jones is our AOS board chair, and we have a number of other board members in the room too. So, I'm glad to see you folks here. I think one of the distinctions that we wanted to make tonight is that when we had our initial forum right after the Parkland event, there was a very heavy public safety presence, and we also in consideration of the walkout and all the things that were going on nationally, we also wanted to include some opportunity for student voice. And one of the pieces that we wanted to acknowledge is that we really didn't hear from a lot of people in time didn't allow that evening to hear from members of the public, members of the community. There's a lot of information to process. And then subsequent to that event, there's some work that you should be aware of that has been done by the schools, and we are doing. So we wanted to share a little bit of that briefly, but we also wanted to hear from you and try to work through some of your questions, your comments, and concerns. So we hope to be able to do that. For those folks that couldn't attend tonight for conflicts, the event is being recorded, and we'll also have that up and running on our website. I would like to start with just a brief overview of some of the things that have been going on in the schools. I'd like to be able to tell you that it's universal, but different schools are in different places. So there are going to be some nuances with some of the physical plans. But I'll try to give you a snapshot of the work that's been done to date, work that we hope to do over the summer months, and then work that we hope to plan for the future too. And then if we don't hit any one of your topics, we can circle back to those pieces. One of the pieces we've tried to work to in all of our schools is single point of entry. We're trying to balance that with making sure that our schools continue to be warm and welcoming places for our communities. When I talk about single point of entry, this is a great example. This facility built 50 years ago. Many of our schools have multiple points of entry and egress. When we talk about single point of entry, we're talking about people coming to the school, visiting. We want them to check in a single location, sign in, be recorded, and move accordingly through that type of system. Sign in and sign out protocols. It's important for us to know, as much as we want to make sure that we focus on student safety, we want to focus on staff safety, and we want to focus on visitors. So when people are coming and going, knowing who's in our buildings, where they're going, and when they leave. But that's an expectation that holds true for me, for school committee members, for vendors. So that's been a recent change too. Panic buttons are buttons that are in place in some of our facilities now. Some of our schools don't have them, but we're working to install them. And what I mean by that is a remote device. Some are hardwired and remote, where an individual in an office setting, be it a secretary or an administrator, has the ability to push that button and have response. That message goes to alarm companies, and then public safety units respond accordingly. When they respond, it's important to know generally they may not know why they're responding. But just a quick aside to that, we had a fire pull about a month ago, and public safety was here on this campus within a minute and 45 seconds. So the response time is quick. Lockdowns, schools are required, two things you should know about lockdowns. We're required by law to hold them. So our school administrators are scheduling them and holding them and recording them. And the recording of those drills is public information. So if anybody wanted to know when drills are held and in what schools, we can provide that. Evacuation drills, simply put, those have been things that have been long-standing components to the schools. We might think of them as fire drills. And those are also required. So each school is required to hold those evacuation drills, not just for fire, 2 within the first 2 weeks of school. And then there's an expectation accordingly through the fire code to hold them throughout a certain number through the year. Trainings are an area that we've held some minimal, some trainings that have been administratively focused. We are acutely aware that we need to bring the trainings to the staff and the students, and we're working actively to do that. The administrators, I think it was last week, it might have been the week before, we had a Hancock County Technical Center training for all area superintendents, all area police chiefs, and we had a training envelope there. And our takeaway from that is we want to bring that training to our staff and then a component to our students. So know that that's in the queue. Administrators have been active to be able to go to other schools and observe during drills in other schools. We share our plans, which are, we don't share our our emergency plans publicly. We don't do that for obvious reasons because we don't want to compromise those details. But we do actively share those with law enforcement. We consult with them. They are reviewed annually and they're required to be approved annually. Updating entryways with locked door buzzer systems are components we're working to in various schools. You might notice if you come to the high school that you have to go through a system there. Pematit has a similar system. Recently in Bar Harbor, they went through a system too. So our schools are in various places in implementing systems like that. You'll see visitor badges. Some schools will give you stickers. Some schools will give you an actual badge to wear. One of the things we're conscious of is having badges for staff and providing those, and we can do those photographs through the yearbook companies at no cost, and so providing access for the staff. And then the question might be for students too, if they'd like to have access to those and providing those. And then certainly we've been strong supporters of encouraging law enforcement to visit our schools. We're very appreciative of the relationship we have with local law enforcement, but that's not just confined to Mount Desert and Bar Harbor. We have Southwest Harbor PD and certainly Hancock County Sheriff's Department. And then that extends out to first responders and public safety assets there. Park rangers, you name it. We want folks to know they're welcome to come to our schools and appreciate it. Work to do this summer. We continue to do assessment in our buildings and figuring out what the areas are, where the gaps are in terms of which locks need to be completed that may not have locks, which doors or areas need to be reinforced, which windows might need to be frosted, and what's the appropriate way to do that. This is a perfect example here in the music room, these blinds. One of the suggestions was, okay, so why don't we just frost the lower third of the glass? But then in talking to the instructor, Mr. Remy, it's like, oh, no, we like our windows, we want to see outside. So, but we know that these vertical blinds are the missing pieces. That's not working either. So it's about finding the balance to work with the staff and the administration to figure out what's going to be the best fit for those rooms. And that's going to be different in elementary buildings and classrooms, and so that work is ongoing with the administrators working with custodial staffs and school staffs. Certainly, and this can't come at a better time, but training for staff. I think one of the pieces we're aware of is it's not enough to just implement a lockdown drill or say, do this or do that. we know we have to empower staff and students to have options to know what to do in various situations. And that is work that we're doing in concert with public safety. Even after various events, whether it's a Columbine, a Newtown, or any of those other tragedies that have unfolded, there's always information that comes out of those that is research-based, best practices, and we want to work to incorporate those best practices in what we bring to our staff and students. Long-term planning, continuing to hold drills, but also providing training for our students and staff with options. And depending upon who you talk to, which subject matter expert or which philosophy you aspire to, there are different pieces and components to consider. There's the run, hide, fight component. There's also the acronym ADD, which is avoid, deny, defend. And so we're working to balance those practices in terms of what the best option is going to be for our staff and students. And Ian Braun made a great observation. The training we went to with the police, it was more, there was a video and there were components, but one of our observations was, it was, I'm sorry, it wasn't, it was
Right, it was
It
the
was
avoid,
based on-
deny, but it was set in a business scenario
Thank you.
where adults are responsible for themselves versus our situation where you have adults responsible
Thank
for
you.
children, and that's going to look different at different ages.
Right.
And it looks different in a school than it does in a business, and we've got to work with public safety to figure out what looks best for us.
And the different levels, secondary versus elementary. So our takeaway was, wow, that's great training, but then Ian accurately pointed out, we have to hold off on that because that's a business setting, it's not a school setting. And so working with individuals in terms of what's going to be the best fit for our schools. We also know that if we're in a situation with a lockdown or a lockout, if you will, where the threat may be outside and we want to have closure in place, we have to have resources in our classrooms. So there are things that we have to procure that might be the staples to support staff and students for a long-term situation until they can be released. So that comes down to basic sanitation, it comes down to water, it comes down to supplies, and so we've identified kits, and there are some schools that have procured those items, other schools are working to do that. So that was work that will progress. And then, you know, I can't emphasize it enough, I've said it already a couple times, but it's going to be ongoing and continued professional development components. So those are the major themes that we've worked on to date. I would invite any of you guys, are there any points on things that we've done to date or are in the queue that I've missed before we open it up to some of the other folks over here? Anybody want to add anything?
I can add, our counselor shared some resources and some talking points with parents to talk, how to talk to children at different developmental stages about the safety drills that we do. And I find those resources from our counselors or social workers really, really helpful, and that parents appreciate those. So I think that's an important part of all this.
Anyone else? So I guess what we'd like to do is at this point, I think the best way to move forward is to hear from each of you. What your questions, comments, and concerns are, areas that you feel we need to pay more attention to, things that we might not have mentioned, gaps. And we also have some other individuals too, besides ourselves, that may be able to respond. There's some social workers and other folks. So is there anybody? And we are recording, so I would just ask that if you wouldn't mind, because the camera's focused there, if you wouldn't mind coming down and just stating your question or your comment, that would be great, please. Anybody like to start?
I'll start.
Please.
All right. Where would you like me to stand? Here?
Oh yeah, that's fine.
Okay. I'm Tracy Millen. So I've been at all of these, and I've addressed my concerns with the board recently as well. So there's a couple things that I still don't really have clarification or answer on. One of them is one of the kids at the First Safety Forum said it would be great if we had an anonymous tip line. I think that was one of the best things that was thrown out. We still haven't heard anything about that. Even a box at every office where kids could drop something into would be helpful. I think in the last case where there was a threat at this high school, it would have been helpful. So something easy to do.
Okay.
I think it would be nice to get that done before next year.
Do you want a response to that now, Tracy? Do you want?
I'd love a response if you have
Yes.
something that's being worked on, it'd be
Yes.
nice to know.
Matt?
As of yesterday, we signed an agreement with a company that provides an anonymous tip line source for both a desktop-based, a web-based, and a mobile app that will allow students to, well, not just students, but anybody, to anonymously give information, whether it's about school safety or bullying. I think the company started as a bullying program, but I think they've expanded more into the safety, the physical threat piece. And so it will allow an individual to make a tip, and it will alert anybody that we immediately alert them. So we're doing this in the high school. We're piloting it in the high school because that's probably where it's the most relevant. But it will immediately alert Ian and Tim and me. And depending on the threats, depending on what it is, it also may go to guidance. And then we can immediately engage that individual if we have a follow-up question we can ask.
So the company contacts whoever.
There's not really, it's not really, the company is not really an intermediary, it's an immediate. It's like sending me a text message.
Okay.
It's that instantaneous. And then it will log all the conversations, but it's obviously anonymous, so it's completely anonymous, unless the person decides to write their name. So that is, what'll happen is I'm getting a packet from the company tomorrow. Well, I think it's tomorrow, maybe tomorrow or Monday that it'll get here, and it'll have posters and with a QR code, so the students can download the app and then scan the QR code, it automatically links it to our.
So it's something that will be implemented tomorrow?
I won't say tomorrow, I don't want to overpromise, but
Okay, sooner rather than later, right?
certainly
Okay.
next week.
Awesome.
Yeah, and so what we'll also do, we'll put information up, but also we're going to call everybody down and walk and say, okay, usually it's like, okay, everybody put away your phone. It'll be the opposite. Everybody take out your phone and download this app.
Okay. And you talked about empowering teachers and giving them the resources to know what to do in every situation. And I know you talked also about student training, and I'm hoping that also means that, I just want to give you an example. I have a young cousin who was in her high school classroom this year, and they had a very serious threat at their school. They had a lockdown called. The teacher wasn't in the room. So all the training that they had from previous lockdowns was something they had to take and put into service themselves. They needed to know to lock the doors. They needed to know what to do if the teacher came back and knocked on the door, that they can't open the door. They needed to hide in the closet for 2 hours by themselves and text their parents on the phone and say, we don't know what's happening and this is really, really scary. And so I think making sure that the students, even in our elementary school, know what to do if the teacher's not in the room or if they're locked out of the room, because that's a very scary reality. So that, and then I think you're talking about the counselor having resources, and Tara McKernan put out an awesome packet. But I think having something that goes to every school so that we have kind of a uniform response in how we do this. And I know it might have to be different for every building, but the emotional response at least should be uniform, and what we can do should be uniform. So I think that that's important. And the other thing that I had on here is I'm wondering how many of our teachers have ER training. We just had an event happen, and there wasn't an EpiPen available. This took place at the high school. Luckily, there was a student who had one, but that's kind of scary.
Just clarification, you mean emergency
Emergency
response?
training for
Okay.
medical.
Yep.
I know that our school has an AED. I don't know if we just have one. I don't know where they are. Even doing an open house with the parents where they're like, hey, AED's here, first aid kit's here. And these teachers have the training, because if something happens, even at an event at the school, you want to know where those things are. The only other thing that I have, and I don't really know how to address this, I know that we have a legal issue where we can't identify students who are doing threats. On the other hand, our kids are still letting friends into the door, and they don't know who to not let in. So there's got to be some way to address that where we at least give some kind of identifying information. It's nice if the doors have alarm systems on them or something and the kids can let their friends in, but until they do, the truth is the kids are going to do it. And if we're not giving enough information to let them know who not to let in, if there's a serious threat, that person could be let in. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Those are very helpful. Yeah, Matt, please.
For the high school, we do have a pretty hardy emergency response crew with teachers, and I suspect it's probably the same in some of the elementary schools. So we have a group of about 20 or so teachers who are that first response team, led by Holly Burr, our nurse. And we practice. We do probably 6 or 7 times a year. We do specific drills around different types of potential safety issues, including we did one a mock-up on a mass violence situation earlier this year. As far as AEDs, we have 2 in the building, like accessible, one in the gym and one outside the nurse's office, and she also has one in her office. But those, well, I guess those are available if somebody needs them. And another thing,
I think she mentioned about students letting certain people in who took that in and not to. What your thoughts were around how we're going to move forward with that?
if we get into a situation where we have an imminent threat, we will identify the individual if we know who it is. If we're in a situation where we know there's a threat, we will. In the immediate situation, we don't worry about privacy. We would very clearly identify who the person was if we knew.
Did you want to follow up too? We talked a little bit about, I know we did, I don't want to make this just high school, but you've had some thoughts about working with the students' entrances and how you're going to engage them in terms of best practices there.
Yes, we have had meetings, and you can jump in anytime too, with different diverse groups of students, and the message has been similar to what you just said, Tracy, is that students are going to let each other in. It's just true. With the best of intentions. I mean, honestly, if I see somebody outside the door and it's freezing outside, I'm probably going to let them in. I mean, under reasonable circumstances. So one of the things that we did talk about as a situation to try to resolve that, well, several things. One is the idea, and we don't know the feasibility. We've discussed the idea of putting a camera on this door here that they can see in the office, that can be remotely opened, the same way they would do when someone came in individually. Then the student would come down and check in the office. One of the challenges that Mark talked about is the multiple points of access, and because of the way this building is aligned, the main entrance is as far as possible away from where everybody parks. And so, I don't know, 2/3 of the students who park their cars come in, park out there, and maybe 1/3 of them park over here. It's kind of a mess, and people can come in from any different direction. And one of the biggest problems is people go out to their car out in that parking lot, and then they're 100 miles away from the door that they can get in. So one of the things we're exploring is, hot off the presses, I haven't said this even to teachers yet, is,
You can hold.
well, no, but we are thinking about what the logistics would be of having all student parking be out here. That way, and then we could explore the idea of this being an entrance, or it's not nearly as far to walk from this parking lot around to that main door. There are certainly drawbacks to that for both adults and for students. We haven't explored it all the way through, but I think that would at least cut in half the number of entrances, and the most problematic one is the one down by the gym. So that would take that somewhat out of play for students.
A couple other things as far as addressing students or teacher outside the classroom. We're installing deadbolts on all the doors. There'll be a lock on the outside that can be keyed. On the inside, it'll just be the turn like many of you have at home. So no longer would a student necessarily have to rely upon, if the teacher was out of the room, they could still secure and lock the door in the event of something like that. And again, like I said, we'll have keys, so it's not like students can lock us out as far as teachers and administrators go. We have talked about alarming some doors. I don't know where it's going to go. Again, there's some drawbacks to that as well, but certain doors certainly could be alarmed, especially if we address some of our parking concerns. And to date, we will continue as our procedures update, students and train students on what the procedure is, moving forward if that changes at all with the lockdown. So we did practice our second lockdown drill recently, and we had that in the afternoon to reach more students, because we know some of our student population is away in the morning, some is away in the afternoon. So to keep that balance, and we do the same thing with our evacuation drills. We have a certain amount in the afternoon, a certain amount in the morning, and try to balance that so higher chances that all students experience those types of drills. So we had our unplanned evacuation the other day because an alarm was pulled. When the fire department arrived, we had accounted for all students, and they were up here under 10 minutes. The fire department checked in. We were able to say we have all staff and students accounted for either through the attendance absent list, that they're at HCTC, or had left for an appointment, or they were physically here. So that's I felt good about that, because we've had that timing in a drill, but that's a drill that adults that are running that knew about, and to do it when people did not know and still had everything in place we needed to take attendance, I was happy that worked. So.
That's a good segue and follow-up to one of Tracy's points too. We actually met with a representative from a security company today. One of the things we're aware of is that none of the safety pieces should be solely administratively driven. Staff and students need to be empowered that if they see something that's unsafe or hazardous or a threat, that they can initiate pieces that are going to make the building more secure, make them safer, staff safer. So we don't want it to be centralized that it has to be an administrator calling for a lockdown or securing. That if somebody sees something and they're a staff member or a student, that with the proper training that we'd like to provide in some other scenarios, that they know what to do. At least they have options and resources, as opposed to right now not knowing what to do or having to be told solely what to do. Christy, whatever you're comfortable with.
I was just, my son recently participated in the Katy Community Theater, and I think it's amazing that the high school is a resource for all these community groups. But one of the things I noticed is that they have rehearsal on Saturday mornings. And so somebody must have let them in, and then they prop open the door in front of the auditorium. People come and go all day to rehearsal. And I remember walking in thinking, well, if I wanted to stash a bunch of guns, I would just come in during ACT rehearsal on Saturday and stash them wherever I wanted them, because there's nobody here. There's no main entry. There's no one in the office. And so my thought is, I don't know if we've thought about actually having a staff person who works on Saturdays. And I know the janitors are here, but they're not here in that safety capacity, that someone is at that desk to buzz people in for those functions and see people. Because I just watch people coming and going, all the doors are propped open, and I know it's totally, Mark, I got locked out the other day. I left my keys in a classroom, and I spent 40 minutes wandering the building, trying to get someone to let me in so I could drive my car away. You are totally locked down during the week. But I feel like on the weekends, when all members of the community are using this space, where we have a gray area, and at night, but that was at night. I was locked out at night, but and so I don't know if we've ever talked about staffing a person on Saturdays or considered that. So just throwing it out there.
Just a quick question. You guys thought about doing a card key access on these two side doors, like we have a Jack's with a student ID would open them? Ideally, you guys could disable student's ID if you found out that, hey, the student has a threat, and maybe you can quickly disable it so they can't get in.
Yes, we are looking at that. I'd actually invite Heather to talk about the system at Bar Harbor, at Connors Emerson, because you have that system, maybe talk about how it works, if it's working, and we're looking at that. And when we look at those things, we're trying to look at things that are going to be able to be universally employed, so if we can, insofar as possible, look at bulk purchasing. want to talk about that?
So we have the two buildings. Connor's building has our main office where we invite visitors to come and we do have security doors, but we also have the Emerson building, which is, you know, on the other side of our parking lot, and we have students walking in between all day long. We have some of our specials, French and art, down in the lower building, but all the students go between both buildings because we have the cafeteria and the gymnasium and the library in the other building. So we have the buzzer system. It has a camera, and when students come back and forth, we kind of train them to go in packs or flocks so that we don't have the buzzer going all day long. But it goes to both our Connors secretary and our Emerson secretary, and we're able to buzz people through the students when they come in, parents, and we start that in the morning. We had the doors propped open before, so when students came off the bus, that they could just go right into their classrooms, and at 8:15 we'd shut the doors. But in the last, I want to say 2 to 3 weeks, we've had the doors shut all the time, including at night. It's actually worked out quite well, and we've trained the kids and the staff and visitors that come. One thing that I can say is basketball games, and when we had our board meeting the other night, what do we do during those times? So that still is a question. But I'm just wondering if maybe if that buzzer system, because the kids all come kind of at the same time, and it seems to have worked.
Your staff have cards though. They
We
can
all have
swipe in,
cards, yes.
but students don't. And I
Exactly.
think to this gentleman's point, you know, and you know, there's certainly age level appropriate, but I think his point was maybe about students having a card where they could enter at various times beyond staff. Is that correct, sir?
Correct, yeah, the students, either that way they need to go to their car, they've had permission to go,
Yeah.
somebody doesn't need to open the door for them, you know who's coming and going, because it's recording it, you know, somewhere in
And
the
it's
database.
kind of training for us, training the students,
I
you know,
think
even the
that-
kindergartners.
I think in the beginning it was a little clunky, but I think there's been a culture change on that campus, and it's been very refreshing. So now all the kids know what to do, and the adults know what to do, and it's just part of the campus now.
The beautiful thing about that system, we've all gone to hotels where they had a little plastic card, we might have lost it, or it was demagnetized. No problem. You just can reactivate or do another one. Or if it's a student that's no longer with us, or a staff member that leaves, that can be deactivated right away. The other beautiful thing about that is, who knows who has keys, who does not have keys, who made keys, who did not. And so that's another advantage to that type of system. So I think when we look at our facilities and when we look at infrastructure and when we look at upgrades, that needs to be a focal point.
And we thought it was going to be cumbersome for the staff, especially the secretaries, and really it's worked out quite well. And Tracy, can I just add one thing that you had said about the students being by themselves in the classroom? And for the most part, I would imagine that would be more high school. And in thinking, Kate, for myself, if you could add substitute teachers when we have somebody in the classroom that might not know the procedures. And so that's a conversation that we're having as well. So I just wanted to add that to it.
Can I add to that too? I'm sorry. Is there a question over here?
I did like.
I'm sorry. I think I look at these.
Nobody's going to say no to you.
I look at these. I'm sorry. I'm just going to forget it. We look at these lockdowns as a training opportunity, and as there's no right or wrong answer. So it's really good that people are thinking that way. And we've only had these two lockdowns at the high school, but I would love to be able to throw in scenarios like that. I think that's really effective, and it's good for the kids. So thank you.
Not to come back, but one of the pieces that we were intrigued by with the individual we talked to today actually does that, provides scenarios for teachers and students where they can actually go through some events and be able to break down what was and what wasn't appropriate and ask questions. And we also know through that we're conscious that things probably won't happen at the best part of the day. It's going to happen during a passing time, or when students are out of the field, or at lunch, and so we want to make sure that we're aware of that. I'm sorry, I think you were next, man.
Yes, I won't stop down. What Ms. Webster was saying, a couple of things. I was very happy to know that I didn't know ahead of time that they were going to do a lockdown until this week. Very pleased. Neither kid talked about it. When I inquired, because we heard about it after the fact from Ms. Neely, one of my children said, when I inquired, said they need to teach substitutes because all mine did was talk during the whole thing.
So I thought that would be important to relay. If you do the swipe cards, I think paying the extra, not just to swipe to get in, but to track who's coming in, a log is going to be working.
Yeah, we do have the capability to do that. And it's interesting, just two small things on that. We had, I know if I'm in the bathroom, what happens during a lockdown has been the conversation in mostly the K4 and K6 classrooms. So we did have a few kids during that, and we didn't shoo them back to their classrooms. And so we had the ed tech bring them in, and at the end of it, they walked back into their classrooms, and we were like, okay, so what happened? Can you talk about it? Can you tell them that, you know, you did the right thing and it was fantastic, and was it scary for you? And so they were like celebrities within their classroom talking about it, but it was really interesting because it was the unknown. And so the more scenarios that we do, it just, you know, the kids talk about it. And one of the other students I had asked after the first lockdown was, how did it go? What did you think? Do you have any questions for me? And the question was, yeah, why haven't I been doing this since I was in kindergarten? Like, okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that feedback. So,
One last thing.
Yes, please.
And again, I was pleased that I didn't know about it ahead of time. I'd like to encourage an administrator to call it, to call a lockdown with nobody on campus, and see how your staff reacts. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Hi. Hi, I'm Sarah Knox. I'm a student at MDI, and I've had like a couple meetings with Mr. Bond, and I think a point that I've been trying to express a lot is not only the point of physical safety when we talk about school safety, but also the point of feeling emotionally safe in your school. And I just want to kind of make sure that we are still being human and not trying to maybe turn this into a type of, maybe prison is too strong of a word, but I just want to make sure that even the kids still feel emotionally safe, because I know that sometimes when rules get tougher and freedoms are taken away, I start to feel a little less safe, maybe as if I'm not trusted as much, or as if maybe something is really going to happen if we take so many precautions to it that it starts to feel more real than it actually is. I know that this is a very real circumstance that could happen and that we should absolutely prepare for it, but I just want to make sure that we're not going to such an extreme that people start to feel unsafe in the school community.
Thanks, Sarah. That's that balance we're trying to find.
Very awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think I think you said it better than anybody could have. It's about incorporating the student and the staff feedback to make sure that we do strike that balance. Thanks.
And I think that speaks the importance of that we have met probably over 30 students, Matt, just because we don't want to react just in a bubble as adults. We want the input of the students, and they know different things about this building than we do. So it's really helpful for them, and there's some things I think that we wouldn't have thought of or considered that I think we're pretty considering now because of the students' inputs. You know, it runs the gamut. We were talking about a lot of different safety aspects about the school, not just an intruder in school, but a lot of things that concern us about safety. So, you know, they've been great, and we do plan on continuing those meetings and having them be part of that decision-making process on many items moving forward. So,
I think one of the things we're most proud of is the culture of our schools, and you mentioned the freedoms and the access, and it's about balancing that also with the expectations to be safe. And I think that's where this is good, because people will tell us when it's gone, the pendulum is shifting too far. Yes, please.
I just have a quick question. So I'm a senior both here at this high school and at HCTC, so I'm gone for the afternoon. So I'm just going to circle back to drills about this question. So I have had a total of either 1 or 2 drills that I've been able to attend this year. I was at the lockdown drill earlier this year, and I was at one evacuation drill, but honestly, it may have been in spring last year. It was that far away. And I know you can't say specifics of when, but are you planning in the future more drills at different times? Because I feel like all the information that has been presented about this or actual drills has been happening during advisory periods or in the afternoon when there's maybe a break, but I am not personally there for this, and I know it's just maybe 10 of us at the most some days, but still it's important for us to know this kind of information. So,
Sure.
yeah.
So I'll jump in on that, and I would invite others. The expectation, at least for me, is that we enculturate drills, and we do that at least on a monthly basis. That said, we have to be conscious on evacuations of weather. We don't want to put people in bad situations in winter conditions, but we have to be prepared for that too, because we could have a fire or evacuation in the winter, and we have contingency plans for that. But you're exactly right. I mean, what do we do with students who are off campus at other events or on field trips, number one. Number two, as we mentioned earlier, it's Murphy's Law. It's probably not going to happen at the best time of the day. So we have plans, and this is going to be a nightmare for the administrators, about what do you do with a drill and getting to a place where they're unannounced. It's announced that it's a drill, but people don't know in advance. That's the highest level of capacity of training. And add to that during lunchtime or passing time. So that's a place that we want to get to and need to get to very soon. Anybody want to jump in on that?
We do try to balance those evacuation drills across the 4 blocks. We're supposed to do 6 of those every year, 6 fire drills. And we try to spread them out throughout the different times of day for 2 reasons. One, so if people aren't here, it balances out. Plus, it minimizes the impact on different classes, because every time we do a drill, we're not in class. And that was the specific reason that we did a lockdown drill in the morning and 1 lockdown drill in the afternoon, was because of people with alternate schedules.
The other piece where I want to be sensitive to and conscious to, but not excuse, is I think Sarah mentioned the social and emotional component, and recognizing that some folks have some significant anxiety around this, or they might have post-traumatic stress disorder. So how do we work within that and with our social workers and guidance counselors and individual students and staff to balance that? That's a place that we have to recognize as well.
Yeah, I think that the big issue here, at least with me, is that I'm getting frustrated because as a student, I'm not getting the same information that everyone else is.
Okay.
And that's, I think, the scary part to me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Please.
So I appreciate all the talking and everything that people are coming up with ideas and how we're going to fix this and what's the best way to get from point A to B. But I sat in that last meeting we had, and clearly it was an emotional meeting. It was very close to the whole Parkland incident. But a bunch of these kids were specifically talking about this area right here.
Yes.
And it doesn't sound like very much has happened to change that situation. I have been here a number of times, and I brought Emily in, and I'm watching, kids coming in and out this door. I've been at the front seeing kids go in and out during the day. So I think we need to be a little bit aware of talking about them feeling safe. Are they feeling safe? And I wanted to ask some of these kids, has anything changed in this situation? Are you feeling safe? They were concerned about this room and the practice rooms. And even if there's not a lot that you can physically do right now, is there something that you can do that makes them feel safe?
I don't know, I'll say something. Well, as I was saying, I'm not really at the school a lot. I can't take music block period anymore because I'm gone for block C. As you could say, an outsider perspective who is still as a part of the music program, constantly in this music room just outside of the music block, I have not noticed any changes whatsoever. Nothing in the practice rooms, nothing in the music rooms, and that's something I wanted to address too, because even though I'm not technically part of block C music, I would like to know what's going on. Since I am here, this is like my second home in the school, so I do want to know what's going on.
Oh, please, Sarah.
If I might be able to respond to that. I am here almost in every single moment of my free time during the school day. I come here in the mornings during locker break, during music, and then even after school. It's a real home for me. I'm here all the time, almost every day. And I think part of the reason that this place feels so safe to me is because of the home and the sort of family that's been created here. And I haven't really experienced that in a lot of other situations, especially in a school setting. And especially in this room is really where I feel most safe in the building. I don't feel safe really in the cafeteria. I don't really feel as safe in the gym. When I get here, I know that there are like 50 people in the room who care about me and maybe 50 people in the room who love me. And I think that maybe the reason that I feel most safe is because this space has stayed constant through everything. Even though there have been many things going on in the world, I can still come here and have a group of people who I can talk to. And I think that sort of camaraderie and family is really the reason why I personally feel most safe here. So I think some of the ways that we're talking about changing this space, like frosting over the windows, kind of scares me, because being able to come here, see outside, talk to people is really maybe, I think that me personally, I get the most sense of safety emotionally and less from seeing physical changes.
Thank you. Please.
I just kind of had a clarifying question. What time will locks be put on these two doors?
Excuse me, what?
When will locks be put on these doors?
Matt, you want to speak to that?
Which door? There are locks on.
These two doors you cannot lock from the inside. There are usually 100 students in here during Block C, so if anything happened, for example during lunch, one of those hectic times, a person could come in, we couldn't lock the doors from the inside without sending someone out of these doors to lock them. Therefore, 100 of us are exposed, or one person's just screwed. Honestly, who's that going to be?
Well, just like most of the doors in the building, they can be locked. They can stay locked all the time.
Not on the inside, though.
Right, but the doors can be locked, and someone can hold them open for people to come through when they need to come through. We ask everybody to keep that door locked. Everybody's classroom door is supposed to be locked by default. So all you have to do is close it.
Okay. These ones aren't usually.
So
That's not a mechanical problem.
Yeah.
As far as that, we actually just walked through today, and as I think it was Mr. Braun that said, we are installing deadbolt locks on all of the doors in the whole building that people can go around and do, whether you have a key or not, and from the inside. It's a little bit more technically difficult with a double door like this, but there are solutions to that. The solutions that you can do like this are not long-term solutions. We don't want to halfway do things. So, for example, we are getting shades for these windows. Those shades cost about $300 per window. So we could do it much cheaper than that immediately with the money we have right now, but that's not the way to do things. So we decided we're going to spend $2,000 to put new shades in this room. But we just don't have $2,000 laying around. So that's a longer term fix. To fix that door, to fix it right, so that it can be locked from the inside, there's not an immediate thing you can do, because not only is it expensive, but there's not a real clear answer either. We did reinforce this door over here, the side door. That one, even when it was locked, it could be open before we pushed that through. We put deadbolts on all the practice room doors. And we have gone around and evaluated what the next steps are. We're also going to be able to make it so you can lock those outside doors, the second set that goes out into the hall.
So you got three things. You've got the expectation where you want doors aren't locked, you want to reaffirm the expectation that they need to, number one. Number two, you're trying to balance quick fix with doing it the right way. And I heard what you said about cost, but we're going to do things right, bringing recommendations for cost to the boards. Is that
Yes.
fair? Yes, please.
Hi, Peggy Knox, mother of Sarah. I get a little bit concerned about I don't know how
how to say this, but a little bit of spiraling, and I think you guys kind of touched on it earlier, but kind of spiraling, it's easy to spiral and talk about, well, how do we defend ourselves if this happens? Or what if, how do we do this if this happens? Well, like, you could have a shooter in here who could lock the door from the inside and have that 100 kids. I mean, there are so many, you can spiral right down through the earth with a gazillion different scenarios. And I worry a little bit about where that's headed as a culture here on this island, because we are such a strong community of people. And I think the reason why a lot of kids get scared and a lot of kids care about these big issues is because we as a community have taught them to care about each other deeply and immensely, not just for this local community, but for a global community as well. And how do we help teach them so that they can go out into this world without living in a fortress?
Well, my initial response to that, and thank you for bringing that up, because again, what I've heard from a number of people is balance, not going so far that we create fortresses and isolate people and change the culture. I come back to relationships. I mean, we can harden schools, we can, there's a multitude of things we can consider. But really, I think what carries the day, an observation for me, is relationships. And what I mean by that is making sure that everybody is valued, everybody's respected, and everybody has somebody that they feel connected to. Whether that's a student and an adult, but making sure that no one is isolated. What happens with that is that when somebody is not feeling valued or they're not feeling connected, there's an awareness, and hopefully somebody will say something and we can bring the resources to bear. Where I think that's really important, and this is a shout out to the kids and the staff, is that we've had a number of things that have happened in our schools this year, and we've been able to mitigate them because somebody's come forward and said, I don't feel right about that. Could you check that out? And I think that's very healthy, and we need to be doing more of that.
Are some of the resources, because you talk a lot about the resources, like it's expensive to put in shades, it's expensive to put in new locks, it's expensive to do all these things. How much of the resources and time and money is going to either recognizing a certain profile of a student who might be at risk, are you guys getting trained in, because there's got to be enough, there should be enough data, maybe, I don't know, because we're talking about out of the gazillions of high schools around, this is still, do you know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to offend anybody.
No.
Like, if there's a profile that we can talk about that you guys are sort of like, and is that something that kids can be trained in? Like, look, this person is feeling kind of bad, or
We could talk about
Sure.
risk factors.
There's
certain risk factors
and
that's not a profile,
can
but
we
what
get
the risk
to
factors, yeah.
how we can, like, hey, somebody heard something about him, or
I want Basil to weigh in, but the answer is absolutely. But I believe we have to layer it so that we don't shift the pendulum so far that we need to do it with respect and balance.
Absolutely.
And making sure that people feel comfortable with it. Basil, please.
Well,
I'm not, yes, and I don't mean to say that there's a
no, that's okay.
I'm just trying
I
to
totally understand
talk
where you're
about-
coming from.
yeah.
I mean, I think everybody kind of looks for a profile, but I think the profile is incredibly elusive. I mean, as long as I've been at the high school and I've worked with a bunch of kids here, and on any given day, somebody's going to come into my office and going to tell me that as much as we talk about community, I mean, community of high school students is I'm just going to say it's a very different animal, because sometimes you're on the outs with your friend group or your peer group, and sometimes you're on the inside. And given all the changes developmentally that students go through in the number of, 4 years, and every parent knows that between 14 and 18, the developmental pendulum is swing is huge. And so I think, compared to other communities or more settled, older communities, there's kind of a volatility, and I don't mean that in a bad sense, but there's always, potentially somebody at risk. And I think that I pay attention to the people who are at risk. And I could be better in my job in catching those that are at risk if I know about them. And part of it is knowing about them. The problem with people who are outliers is they don't necessarily tend to communicate the pain that they're in and how ostracized and separate and isolated they feel. I think that's, comes down to sort of a responsibility of peer groups. And I said this at the other meeting. I really believe that how do we inspire inclusion? And that doesn't mean, okay, I can sit up here as a staff member and try to do that and tell every student here that they should be inclusive, but or they should let us know when they think somebody's potentially at risk. Students have more access to information than I do, and they're always going to. That's just the way it is. But if students learn not only to include others, and I said this before, if somebody's sitting alone in the cafeteria, are you going to go and sit with that person? Are you going to try to befriend that person? And I was just going to say something and I lost my train of thought. But they can also, they'll know when somebody's at risk. They can go to specific staff people. And it's one thing to sort of profile somebody and say this person is a potential shooter. It's another thing to profile somebody and say that this person is at risk. And there's a vast difference between profiling a potential shooter and saying that this person is at risk.
That's more what I'm saying. How do we start to identify people that are at risk? And
I would say that, I don't know. The people that I work with, the kids that I work with, they're always, and I don't think it's just the kids that I work with. I think it's this, and I don't mean to generalize, and I don't mean to sort of talk down to students here. It's just developmentally, there's a significant range of experience that students have. And on any given day, they can, in relation to the peer group, they can feel fragile, less fragile. In with their peer group, they can feel more resilient, they can feel less resilient. Are there kids that are more at risk? Definitely there are kids that are far more at risk. And I also want to, shout out to parents. I think really inclusion and community begins at home. You could say that it's really about, are you talking to your children? And I'm not going to assume that, parents that are here, I'm going to assume you are talking to your kids. But sometimes the kids that I work with, they're not. The communication is broken down between parents and child. So
I do think it's important as a community to remember that I feel like here, the reason why I moved here 22 years and raised my daughter here is because people care.
Yeah, and I believe that.
And deeply.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to come to school, pick her up, and see one of her friends waiting around outside by herself, kind of need a ride. Well, too bad. I would never do that. And I think that most of the families and parents here reach out to people that they don't even know.
Right.
And I think that's a major key in keeping our kids safe.
Yeah, no,
and keeping the culture what it is instead of spiraling into a dark, scary place.
Let's Heather, then Christy, then Mike. and then I saw your hand there.
Just to sort of go off of this particular conversation and trying to identify students at risk, I feel like whether we have the system in place, we have a system that can be in place. I was having a conversation with a principal of one of the K-8 schools after one of our AOS high school meetings a couple months ago. And they're very aware of, in kindergarten you can identify children that are at risk. And so they're putting services or systems in place for them through the K-8 school. And so, we have plenty of situations where the teachers are communicating with the high school teachers saying, yeah, the student's this kind of math student or English or whatever. So I don't know if it's in place right now where the guidance counselors from K-8 are already talking to you all, and Melissa could probably talk to that. But we kind of have a system there in place to, and so you're talking about the 14 to 18 pendulum. Well, then you've got your K3 and all that, so that it sort of keeps swinging. But it does seem like there are some opportunities to grow that communication.
I totally agree. I mean, I think what I feel about a risk is, one, the person should be identified, and then there should be a lot, because you can very easily take somebody like that, and you can assume risk, or you can assume, that I totally believe in inclusion. How does that person who is potentially at risk become re-enfolded in this community through legitimate, you could call it therapeutic work or call it what you will, but how do they become re-enfolded or re-included back in this community? Because I think the people that are most at risk are the people that don't feel like they're part of this community.
And those are, you can identify those.
Yeah, I spoke to them a lot.
Yeah.
And, this is a good example of communication. We may know things that are in place, but the public needs to know that. Christine?
I was just going to say something similar to what Heather said, and I know as my position on the school board, I know most of these administrators and we spend a lot of time together, so I might feel more comfortable with them than a lot of parents would. But kids talk, and kids talk about kids from other schools, and you hear things. And I know my kids came home with some disturbing information, and I picked up the phone and I called Gloria and I said, I'm not trying to get a child at your school in trouble, but I just heard some troubling information. And Gloria was able to contact Officer Tim, and though they are in place, and I think parents just need to know that we, it takes a village, and there's a network, and you don't have to get a kid in trouble. I wasn't trying to get anybody in trouble. I was worried, and I think everybody should know that even though your child doesn't go to that school, they're all very open. They're all ready, and they all care about these kids more than I've ever seen anyone care about kids. And so I think all parents should know the door is open.
And that's equally as important, I feel.
I think
as a
more
lock
important
on
than
the
door locks, yes.
That you did that, and that kids can find a safety net in that all of these people care.
It comes back to, I know we're talking a lot about physical security, but I'm really appreciative of the fact that people are bringing up emotional security. I think that really carries the thing. I see your hand now. I'm just going to go with Mike, and then we'll come back to you. I'm sorry, you first, then the lady in the back. Mike?
I was just going to say, I think a lot of, within that conversation, a lot of that inclusiveness begins in the elementary schools. And I can say at either Trenton or MDIHS or Connecticut or the other schools, there are things in place that we do with kids to include them, whether that's through the morning meetings or in Trenton trying to institute Kindness Week, and you do that at the beginning where you're fostering these attitudes of inclusion, or buddy benches outside. So if a child sees someone sitting in the playground, they're on the buddy bench, and all the kids know, if there's someone sitting there alone, someone's going to come over and see if they want to play. And so you're doing those through a variety of measures. And I think having guidance staff that work directly with teachers and kids on a regular basis and see them, every day, whether it's through classes or interactions, that sort of builds the relationships that Mark had talked about. And one of the things that we did for years, and they still do at Connors Emerson, and recently doing interviews with kids and asking that singular question: is there someone in your school you feel connected to? When I was at Connors Emerson, that number was always well over 90%, if not 100%. Recently doing that at Trenton, that was at 98% of kids felt that there was an individual within that school that they can connect to. And I think those are important touch points that you want to pay attention to. But again, those pieces start at the elementary school so that you can build the culture we're talking about.
you know, speaking of culture, coming back, you know, things like PBIS, positive behavior intervention supports, we want to catch kids doing things good things, and validate that and build upon that. It isn't always, it shouldn't be a get you game. And it shouldn't be about punishment, consequence. It should be about validating good decisions.
Can I add just a little bit to what Mike said? So, and that doesn't just stop at 8th grade. You know, I've been going through some transition meetings with our 8th graders that are heading up to the high school, and those meetings are tables, the room's full of people who care about the kids, and the staff that come down from the high school, the guidance counselors, special educators, teachers that come. Those meetings are wonderful, and they're powerful, and they're remarkable, and we're able to really relay important information about students' strengths and their challenges and supports and concerns. I invited Matt, he came down to school to meet some of my kids, and
Play basketball for 45 minutes.
but I there's a real concentrated, I think, effort and an attitude, we're all in this together. And, you know, these students that are in these K-8 schools are there for 9 years, and they're headed off to the high school, and everybody that works in these K-8 schools really care about them and want them to be successful at the high school. And I feel like there are a lot of really good embedded systems in there. And I just have to put a plug in for these kids that, you know, kids that we want all kids to feel a sense of community and feel belonging. And housing is a real crisis here on this island, and it impacts these kids and these families, and that's a part of this.
It strikes me that there are many things that we may know about or feel comfortable with that the community does not, and there's that communication piece. Thank you. You've been very patient. Right there in the graph.
Hi, I'm Sean and Ella's mom. And I was just thinking about it, and one of the things that Ella and I talked about after the last meeting, and it kind of goes with the whole inclusion thing, and I've worked at the elementary level, and there's so much I feel like you do at that level to work on making kids feel included and building that sense of community within the school. And I think it continues with high school, and I know there's a lot of communication that happens in that gap, you know, with them getting here. But after that last meeting, Ella and I were talking about it and trying to think of, like, if you were to build a program here, and I know there are things that the school does and to build that community and things like music where kids feel like they're part of a family, but how could you make sure that you're reaching every kid? And one of the things we talked about was, you know, we have advisory where these kids come in and they're assigned an advisory group, and they're with that group and the same teacher for 40 years, and that teacher's seeing them consistently. So what a great resource for information, you know, to see is a kid acting differently. Whereas there's something, when they come in as a freshman, every so often, whether it's scheduled, we do some sort of activity that is an inclusion activity. Something that, you know, some sort of a program that, you know, when they're coming in, this is going to happen during an advisory, and I just feel like it would be a good way to get information to the teacher, to the advisory teacher, that could then be passed on further if need be.
Thank you.
That's precisely 92% of the purpose of advisory. The other 8% is a convenience to be able to share, you know, just rote information. But that's what advisory is all about.
Right.
That's the whole purpose.
Yeah. I just, like, in talking to Ella, and I know probably many advisories are different, but it seems like, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, that it's kind of, and I know it's maybe supposed to sometimes be a free-for-all and be kind of like hang out, talk, whatever, but talking to her, it seems like there's kids that do nothing. Like, she sits and talks to her teacher, but there's a lot that is not productive, I guess. Am I right?
Non-texting.
Right. So if there were maybe something that were, I don't want to say more structured, because you don't want it to feel too structured, but every month we're going to do this activity where you get feedback from the kids, and it doesn't have to feel to them like it's structured and, oh no, we have that today. But, and I don't even know what it looks like. I haven't really thought about it that much, but just something that you can gain some insight, maybe a little bit more than what they're getting, because I know a lot of kids aren't necessarily talking to their advisory teacher, and the kids that are at risk aren't gonna, they're not gonna involve themselves, so something to involve those kids that might be the ones that are at risk.
There's that balance of loose, tight relationships
Right.
and engagement. So, man in the back of the red, and then I saw your hand, and then coming back over to you. And forgive me, I think initially I said you're gonna come down front, but I think Josh is moving the camera, so,
Yeah.
no, you're welcome to stay right there.
I have a lot, I think about this a lot, and I'm pretty excited that we have this forum and that all these people showed up, and thank you all for being here, because I think we thrive as a community when we put that communication in, and this is such a valuable thing, so I'm hoping that something like this will continue. And in addressing school culture, so in the last, when the incident happened, it started in this room with the bait got dumped with a senior prank several years ago. That kind of motivated me to brush off what I had been learning about restorative justice that I had come across like 25 years before. And so in the last 2 years, there's been this little tiny group in Hancock County working with the Restorative Justice Project out of Mid-Coast, Maine, and we're finally actually starting to take juvenile cases. So this year we had, I think, 12, even though we were, I think it was 14. And I finally got to go to some circles, and what I'm seeing is there are some things that are quite alarming about school culture and how peer pressure is involved, and I don't want to go into what's negative, so I'm just going to leave it. But that what's so exciting is to have community members and have these kids come in a circle and see that there are people that have, like, I have there's no investment for me to show up and devote the time of devoting, except that I care. And so when, is your name Peggy? Peggy, yeah. And when Peggy talks about this community being a place where people really care, it's so apparent, even to those kids when they haven't noticed it before, but then they all of a sudden they like to have these kids at the end of the meeting be like, and yeah, I see my behavior affected you because you had to organize this meeting, and thank you for doing that. And so on the one hand, it's great to kind of catch the kids after they've made a mistake, because we all make mistakes. What I would love to see, in talking with some people at different schools, is that when restorative justice sometimes gets implemented, and I think this might have happened at MDI, is that we're just going after the bad kids. And so it's not completely integrated into the culture. And so some of the data, I mean, this is all pretty, 25 years across the country, probably 12, 15 years in Maine. Like, it's a slow moving thing, but one thing they're finding is if you start it as a normal part of culture, that you gather in circles, and I'm hearing that that's happening. So excited that that's happening, that there are opportunities for kids, like, they're not in trouble, they haven't done anything wrong, they can celebrate something great, or they can say, like, or they, was a story of a kid who, the teacher was getting annoyed because, this is somewhere in some other state, teacher was getting really frustrated with this kid because he was probably middle school, and he kept showing up and he was like putting his head on the desk and he wasn't listening and blah, blah. And then they started this morning mindfulness circle, and the kid came in, and when the little talking object got to him, he had his head down, and he lifted up his head and he said, "My older brother didn't come home again last night." And so all of a sudden the teacher, who had been like, as culturally we're inclined to do, like get mad at the kid who's not, showing up, all of a sudden she realized, like, oh my gosh, this kid has been in trouble, and I've been getting angry at him. And instead, like, he needs our support. So that's just a thing that I just want everyone to be aware of, that this little group has started and we're working, and it's intense. And I've been doing it for 2 years, and I'm kind of like, how long can I do this? We need more support. And so, but I'm motivated. So, but what you had said at the last meeting was how many
organizations in our community do care. And I was at the somewhere at the Chamber of Commerce the other day, and I heard there are 170 nonprofits on MDI, maybe in this part of, maybe it includes Trenton, but definitely there's a lot of people. And when you talked about focusing on values, I was like, yeah, what are the values of the community? And how amazing it would be if we had one of these forums and you had this, like, maybe you open up the whole high school and there's little booths all over the school so that all 170 organizations, if they wanted to be here, could have a little table and you could just see what was going on. And then not having to, like, put this advisory pressure as one more thing on the teachers, if they have to do this, some kind of circle every week or whatever. You could have, like, okay, this week these 10 classes are going to get, these 10 organizations are going to come in for those 10 minutes. I don't know how long advisory is, like 7 minutes, but there was a period when my daughter was a freshman that it was like once a week. It was a longer period, and so I wonder if that could get, if it's not that now, if you could go back to that, so that you could have once a week or once a month. You just have these things so that the kids really see, because somebody's going to get sparked. Like the kid that's hurting is struggling, doesn't have the resources in their family to have everything they need, even though we're a very wealthy community. That's the reality, that they're going to get sparked by something because community is coming into the school. And so that's just an idea I had. And again, like, I just generate ideas all day long, so I don't expect anyone to be like, oh yeah, Lena, we're going to do everything you say, but that'd be fun. So I just want to just reiterate what I'm hearing people saying, that if we want to build our emotional safety, it comes from connection, and it comes from listening. And how do we learn to listen? And that was when I first started, right before I became a parent, I took a class on conflict resolution, and the trainer said, there are 4 ways we learn to communicate, and one is, and we learn two of them really well in school, reading and writing. The other 2 are speaking, public speaking, and the other one is listening. And you get the first 2 really well. If you get the amazing opportunity to be in music or theater, debate, you get to practice speaking, maybe some of those book reports that we all hated, or but how do we learn to listen? And so that was my experience being a parent, was like, I want to see I think you have to model it. So like I spent hours listening to this, I'm still like, oh gosh, here we go on the Minecraft thing again. It's been this amazing experience, and then watch my kids be able to be with people and be able to listen, and building inclusivity, and just how can you walk into a room and just be like, oh my gosh, I love you all so much. But if everyone did that, it would be just so much fun, so much better. Okay, so I just, the question that's come up in the restorative process for me is that I've heard several parents say they're recognizing that we collectively, not to point fingers, but collectively, how are we serving our children? What kind of world have we created? And that was what came up for me when I heard about the bait thing. I was like, oh, yeah, where are we sending our boys, out into the world? They have the options to, if they're lucky, they've got some good options, but a lot of people are going to school, it's like, go to more school, and then come out of school with a house loan's worth of debt with no place to live, and the same job economy that was there when I graduated from school 25 years ago. So it's it's interesting to me to see that we don't, and here, how many people can actually leave and then come back. So we cultivated this home, and then, oh well, sorry, real estate's gone up, Again, pointing out what's wrong, so I don't want to do that. I just want to say, just to pop that in our heads, like, how can we create the world we want for our children? And I think our children know the world they want to live in, and if we listen to them, they'll tell us. And so I think in short term, this thing, you could just put up some fabric on the windows, like, until you have the money. And I just want to celebrate the efforts in this that are happening, and I'm so excited to hear about the little circles in the elementary school and being inclusive. And I wrote thanks to Shauna for, and now I can't remember what you said, so I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you. That was great. I heard quite a few things, but one, I appreciate you bringing up restorative justice, and I also appreciate you bringing up what I took away like a nonprofit fair. So thank you for that. Yes, please.
Oh, we're sure.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were first. I apologize.
It's okay. I just have one question. It's not really meant to be answered right now. It's more of a think about, because I think this is sort of one of the most essential questions in dealing with this problem is where do we draw the line between student opinion on how they, like students' opinion and school safety in general? Because I completely agree with Sarah in the fact that there are going to be places for each student that feel like home, whether it be the gym, whether it be the music room. And like her, the music room has been a safe place for me because it's been relatively unchanging. It's remained the same, it's a familiar place. But the fact that we just have to deal with the fact that reality is ever changing. And I came to the high school in 2014, and there was far less risk of a shooting then than now. And I think that things do need to be implemented. And like we're saying about the fogged windows, it was an idea that we were going to possibly pursue, but then Mr. Remy didn't really like it because the students like to be able to look out. But I just need to know where we draw the line with where students feel safe, but if those fogged windows could be the difference between someone being alive and someone being dead, how do we deal with that?
Thank you for bringing that question. Yes, please.
I came in here with one agenda item, which was to make sure my babies are protected and lock down everything. And at first, when these ladies were speaking, I wasn't agreeing with you or hearing you, but I listened to you, Lillian. I listened to them. And so now I see what you're saying. So, I mean, I'm open, and I now understand because I've heard them say it. But other than protecting my babies, I need to know what I can do as a parent, and it's not just communicating with you, but what I can physically do. I've got a voice, I've got my time to help you guys. And the teachers. But I need to know what I can do. I appreciate you taking the time to ask and listen to me, but what can I do to help you?
Yeah, and I think more or less along
And I
the
love
lines. What? I'm sorry.
And I love you.
Can I answer her question?
Yeah, please, please.
And you're married to a school board member, so he's going to tell you this when you get home.
No, you
As a school board, you know, 80% of our job is to write the budgets for these schools. And then we go to all these town meetings and we fight for these budgets. And we get told over and over again, cut your budget, that's too much, your budget's going up. What we need, if you want to do something, come to those meetings. Come to your town council and selectmen meetings and fight for your budgets, fight for your schools, because nobody's showing up. When we have the high school vote for the high school budget, it's 20 school board members and 3 community members and nobody else. And the whole island is invited to that meeting. And so if you want to do something, come out and vote and make your voices heard at all those meetings. And that happens way before your town meetings. We start working on these budgets in November. For example, the Bar Harbor budget goes to the town council in March. They approve it in March, long before the June meeting happens. So, and I know all your other, so I just want to throw that one answer out. Come vote.
I want to put Tim on the spot in a second, so you give me a chance to think.
Bring it.
But, and I saw your hand, man. And I'm conscious that there's about 7 minutes left, but when we end at 7:30, I'm happy to stay and take questions and engage.
Have time, I'd love to say a brief thing about what elementary.
Oh, please, both of you. And to the person who brought it up, we're committed to continued dialogue. We don't view these as one-shot deal. We're not trying to appease or do smoke and mirrors. We do care. We know you care. We don't have all the answers. You've raised more questions. But as long as you'll keep coming, we want to hear from you and continue to work this issue. So thank you. And I would add a couple of pieces along the lines of, and these aren't total answers, but you're doing it. You're here, number one. Being a parent, being engaged with your children, caring. Sometimes being a parent's real hard. Where are they going? Who are they with? What is the social media? All of those pieces, and I know you know that, but we want to reinforce that, and those I think are additional pieces. you've been patient, and I'd like to go to you next, and Tim, I'm gonna ask you for a piece in a second, and we'll come to you. Please.
I just wanted to make 2 points. Considering the number of students at the last meeting that said how unsafe they feel in the music room, and considering now that I know that there's an issue with the door, I'm feeling a little uncomfortable with my back to the door right now. So I'm getting an understanding of what they were talking about. So I'm hoping that that will be taken seriously.
Yes.
And that something will be done about that to make them more
Can I give a quick answer on it? So I'm a firefighter and an EMT, and like you just said, you walked into this room. Be aware of your surroundings. The most important thing in your entire life. Be aware of your surroundings. You know where there's another exit. Any public place, movie theater, airplane, malls, you know where there's another door. The door you came in is probably the worst door to go out, because everybody's using that door. I saw this door over here, I was looking for one over here, I didn't see it. But yes, be aware of your surroundings. It's one of the most important things, because it doesn't matter how many doors are locked, if you can't get in or out and they're on the same side as you, you want to make sure you can leave the area. So.
This, you brought up a great point, man, too. We also, as much as we want to be conscious of the security piece, we have to be conscious of the fire code and the egress piece too. So there's that line, and I get it. It's not easy. So we're balancing that. Was there another point you wanted to make?
Yeah, you were talking about money and how expensive the blinds will be, and $2,000, and that's just the beginning. I would bet if you unleash a fundraiser on these kids, they'll come up with your money real quick. They're really good at that.
Just account money.
These students, there's like a group of 90 of us, we've got a big account right now filled with funds from the community, and would be happy to donate it to get new blinds.
Yeah. Not only that, but I have about $100 left in my music account that I would personally take towards putting walls.
And I offered last month to replace that lock with my own time and money. So the community will help if you put it out there.
The lock's
not broken.
Yeah.
You just said the lock's
Which is
not broken.
interesting, because I wasn't told that the last 3 times, and I'm a little frustrated, quite frankly, that I wasn't told that. And I'm wondering who's not doing their job then. If that door locks, why isn't it locked? So.
Thank you. Heather, yes, Heather, sorry.
I guess I would just like to, because we're getting close to the end, to swing it back to the positive that even though there aren't as many people here as there were at the first meeting, I do think it speaks well for our community that that people showed up. Because there aren't as many kids here, but there are kids here. There aren't as many parents here, but there are parents here. And there aren't as many staff here, but there are staff here, because we do care. And sometimes it's easier to get things done with a smaller group of people, so I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. But I think we need to keep the focus that we want to be safe, but we want to make the kids feel safe, and working toward that continually with a growth mindset is what we have to do. So I didn't want to come tonight because I'm tired and I already had another meeting, but I knew it was the right thing to do, and my kids invested, and so if we just keep that mindset, I think that we can work towards being more positive. And do I think it's been done perfectly? No. Do I have the answers? No. But continually working at it as a group, I think, is a really positive step in the right direction.
Thank you, and thanks for holding our feet to the fire. Edie, did you, I'm sorry, did you have a point?
I just have one quick thing to say, and I've said it before, and I say it at every one of these meetings, that my sister and her family live in Newtown, Connecticut. Her kids were in lockdown. I appreciate all this positivity, and I appreciate everyone saying we live in this community where everybody cares, but so does my sister. And it happens. Yep. And it's awesome that we're looking at the people in our schools and we're trying to identify them, but it's people outside of our schools that are coming into our schools. And the bottom line is most of us as parents want to keep our kids safe, we want to keep their friends safe and everybody, and I don't want this to be taken away, the safety aspect taken away too, because it is a serious, serious issue, and I'm not seeing much that's been done yet, and I don't want to see anybody's kid hurt, and I think we need to really jump on that and do something. I'm sorry if that's the negative, but that's the reality of where we're living right now.
It's not at all negative, and again, I've spent the better part of my career in safety and security, and I get it, and it's about, for me, it's about the balance of respecting the values of the students and the community balanced with making sure that there are things that are necessities that we have to do. I'm not trying to put words to it, I'm just trying to rationalize it. It is almost 7:30, and I do want to give Edie a couple minutes, and then Tim, and certainly want to take any other comments. But Edie, please.
Yes, I'm Edith Dubois. I work primarily now at Connors Emerson, and I just wanted to say briefly what we do there and across the district with our elementary folks. We all have school counselors. We start at the very basic feelings identification in kindergarten, and we revisit that in every grade because, like you said, with the developmental changes that go on, those need revisiting often. One thing that has not been mentioned here that's a great resource in all of our schools is our speech and language pathologists. And they help us a lot with the power of communications. And so sometimes when a student might say, I hate you, you're ugly, they're really trying to say, I want to be your friend. So that's another person that is really beneficial in all of our schools. We're all trained to different degrees, but all of the school counselors are trained in what we call risk screens. And that is if a student, and it doesn't matter if they're in kindergarten or 8th grade or older, if they say anything about harming themselves or somebody else, every statement is taken seriously. I also see preventative and proactive measures at Connors Emerson, and I'm sure this is happening at others, but I'm just at Connors Emerson a lot. Almost every morning I see Heather Webster out there greeting the students individually. You're not looking at your phone, you're giving them a high five or whatever it is, and so that makes the students feel wanted and welcomed. And Mr. Ron, I know when I worked at the high school, we used to go out and wave them off, and so just little things like that.
We've been to.
Yeah. So little things like that, I think, just it might not look like much, but again, it's what we do to make our students feel welcomed every morning. And if today I passed a student that I don't really know all that well, he was sitting on the bench, and I sat down and I said, what's going on? Well, and then we talked just a little bit about it, and then, so just those little connections that we do every day with our students.
Thank you. Lily, I saw your hand, and I didn't want to give you the opportunity. Tim's going to have the last word here.
I wasn't planning on talking about this tonight, but because I didn't know we were going to get into the emotional safety piece, but I have a big concern about the emotional safety of the kids on the bus. Not probably so much in high school, but, and I've never talked about this with Heather, so, but just various things have happened to my son on the bus that are, we talk a lot, so I don't feel like I need intervention or anything, but I do feel like I'd love to see some kind of, I don't know if you pick an 8th grader who could be the kind of RA of the bus or whatever, or if we get parent volunteers, or I know we can't spend more money to put an adult there, but there's a lot that happens on the bus that gets internalized by kids. All the safety and all the communication and all the stuff you can do within the building can be destroyed on the bus. I don't want to get too personal, but I really feel like I do everything I can to not have my son ride the bus. And so I just think it's something that maybe we should be having some conversations, helping the kids be better at advocating, the stronger kids. I don't know how we would do a communication workshop to get kids to notice when things are happening, to intervene. I don't know, but it's a big deal.
Well, I appreciate the bus too, because it's areas too that we don't have adults or people that are strong advocates, bathrooms, hallways, so thank you for bringing that piece. Tim, you know, you were active at Connors, I'm assuming, for a while. You've now been at the high school and Mount Desert and other schools. Observations, what are some things that you see that are positives, some things that are challenges, and I mean, what are your thoughts?
As my role, or as in the spirit in general?
You take it where you want.
Oh, boy.
Okay, time's up.
No, I think it's really interesting. I love what you guys are saying. I think there's a lot to be said about sitting around your dinner table and just having a conversation with kiddos. I think that's super, super powerful. And there's really informal checks in place for kiddos that are on people's radar, exactly what you're talking about. And another thing is that I've talked with people that wonder why we have locks on the doors, and I've talked with people that think we should have metal detectors and dogs every day at the school. So us having these conversations, everybody here has a different opinion on that, and I think that this is a process of trying to hash that out. And where is this community comfortable? Also, in school, I am a very lucky man. I love my job very much, and I feel welcomed inside this school and all the other schools. And but my relationship has also changed a little bit between schools, and I think that's been a little difficult on some of these staff, maybe, and some of and for me, honestly, I mean, I've built personal, cool relationships with these people, and it's kind of changed a little bit, but it's also a blessing. So I think I'll end on that. I mean, we're past time already. I can talk all day. But.
Thank you. I'm conscious of the time, but I want folks to know that, you know, for as long as people have questions, comments, and they want to keep doing these, we'd love to continue them. So we will do follow-ups with you, and in terms of what progress we are making or not making. And appreciate you guys coming, appreciate you holding our feet to the fire, and we don't have to wait for these forums. If you have questions, comments, concerns, send them our way to the administrators, to school committee members, but I can't thank you enough, and appreciate you guys being here. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.